Solving absolute value equations and inequalities. In this section, we are only doing equations, but future sections we will be doing inequalities, so we might as well throw it in together. This is section 1.4, by the way, from our books. Let's start with the absolute value of x. Let's say that we had an equation, absolute value of x equals 3. Well, we know that this x value of 3 could be positive 3 because the absolute value of positive 3 is 3. And it could also be negative 3 in there. So there's actually two answers. There's two situations that we need to think of. The positive situation and the negative situation. Okay? So we just said that x could be positive 3 and x could also be negative 3. So we have an absolute value equation. We're going to have to go through this thought process of step of making a positive situation and a negative situation. So right here I need to do positive situation and negative situation. Okay, so the positive situation is going to be writing it exactly the way it is without the absolute value sticks. And the negative situation will be writing it exactly the same, but your answer or the right side of the equal sign is going to change signs. As you could see, there's a negative on the right side of this equal sign. So that's how you do the positive situation and the negative situation. Let's solve both of them now. On the left side, I'm going to get rid of the plus 3 by subtracting 3 and subtracting 3. So my final answer, the x comes down, the equal sign comes down, I get negative 1 as an actual answer. And on the other side, if I subtract 3 and subtract 3, I'll end up with x equals negative 5, and that's another answer. Now you could go and check these. You could double check them by plugging in negative 1 right here, working it out. It does give you 2. Plugging in negative 5 right here, working it out. It does give you 2 also. So both of those are your answers. So we're always going to be setting these positive and negative situations up, but technically the steps to solving any absolute value. Step 1 is to make sure that your absolute value is actually by itself on one side of the equal sign. So step 1 is to isolate the absolute value on one side. Let's go through those steps. So here we are, steps to solving absolute value equations. Step 1 is to isolate the absolute value on one side. So right here we have an absolute value equation. It's an equal sign, there's absolute values, but the thing is, the absolute values, this right here is not by itself. You need to isolate the absolute value. You need to get rid of this minus 1 and get rid of this multiplication of 2. So let's get rid of the minus 1 by going plus 1. It's going to cancel. What you do to one side, you do to the other side. Let me rewrite it. We will have 2, absolute value of x minus 3 equals 8. And then we still need to get rid of this 2. So let's divide by 2 and divide by 2. And now we'll have our isolated absolute value equation. I shouldn't call it, well, yeah. You need to isolate the absolute value before even thinking about moving on to step 2. So what we've done on all this work right here is simply, number 1, isolate the absolute value on one side. So we have the absolute value all by itself on the left side of the equal sign. And now we could actually solve this thing. So I want to move this up to make more space here. And now I could set up the positive and the negative situation. So I'm going to do positive and negative, and on the positive you just write it exactly the way it is without the absolute value symbols, and on the negative you do the same thing, x minus 3, but you have to change the sign of the 4, make it a negative 4, okay, and then you solve both. On the left side I'm going to go plus 3, x equals 7, that's my answer. On the right side, plus 3, x equals negative 1. That's another answer. So both answers we've solved and checked. That was step 3. Actually, we just solved. We need to check. How do you check? Just simply plug in 7 back into here. 7 take away 3 is 4. The absolute value of 4 is 4. 2 times 4 is 8. 8 minus 1 really is 7. So that works. The other one, when you plug in a negative 1, you end up with negative 1 minus 3, that's negative 4. But when you do the absolute value of negative 4, it changes back to positive 4. And then 2 times positive 4 is 8. And 8 minus 1 is also 7. So you check that one also. Both of these answers are correct. Now sometimes only one answer works, and that really only happens when you have a variable on the outside. Check video 2 to continue these notes.